Good evening. Live briefly to discuss and introduce the courses that we offer this autumn term at the Halkyon Academy. And if you have any questions on that, just let me know in the chat and I'll respond to you at the end. I won't be here very long. I just wanted to point out that we have, for now, two courses, or one seminar and one longer course taking place. The first one is a seminar on Nietzsche's Madman, the section defined in The Gay Science, where Nietzsche, or rather the madman, proclaims the death of God. This seminar will be taught by Professor Ken Cheems, who was Professor of Philosophy at Birkbeck College in London. And the longer course is a 10-week masterclass on Oswald Spengler's The Decline of the West, or The Decline of the Occident, which will be taught by Sebastian Ostrich. I always like pulling out his book. There it is, Hegel, der Weltphilosoph, which is a philosophical introduction to Hegel's philosophy, but also Hegel's life. So Sebastian is currently an associate professor of philosophy at the Institute of Philosophy in Stuttgart. And he suggested to me earlier this year that he'd like to teach a course on Spengler. And that was a great coincidence because quite a few people had reached out to me asking me whether I could offer a course on Spengler, as I was reading The Decline of the Occident myself last year. And so I think Sebastian is better suited for the job. The links to enroll in the seminars are in the description of this video. And maybe for those of you who are new here, I am a self-employed free philosopher, and it is only through your support by either sending gifts on Patreon or PayPal, or by enrolling in a course that really I can continue the work here. As you may know, I publish quite a few videos. I also try and bring relevant philosophical questions to the table. And here's a beautiful quote from Spengler. Dichten und Geschichtsschreiben sind verwandt, Rechnen und Erkennen sind es auch. Poetizing and writing history are kin, so are related. Calculating and knowing are as well. So we already see the kind of understanding that Spengler has when it comes to history. He does not think that by amassing data and going through massive data sets we will find access to history. Instead, for example, Rembrandt's self-portraits he considers as history that has been burned into, or that has been, bound up. That these are history bound up in a moment. So that's how Spengler understands Rembrandt's self-portraits. And perhaps also to point this out, he thinks that Rembrandt's self-portraits, especially towards the later ones, also try to, what's more important there than the self-portrait is actually the background. And that background strives towards the infinite, which is how, if you wanted to have a brief summary of what the Faustian soul of Faustian man is how it is the striving for the infinite, is the striving also for control, and ultimately the striving for control through quantity. So as probably René Guénon speaks of the rule of quantity that is very much within the Faustian soul. So, and also there's a section somewhere, a passage in The Decline of the West, where Spengler says something utterly incredible. He says that the monotheism, which was introduced to Europe by Christianity, ultimately a foreign religion, it was the Faustian soul that tried to outsmart that one all-powerful God, and hence, from the beginning, made pacts with the devil in order to steal away from that all-powerful, omniscient God the mysteries of nature, the mysteries of the universe. Now, perhaps also, to a certain degree, if you think about it, that is precisely the story of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. If you understand who Hal really is. So this gives you perhaps an idea of what Spengler is all about. There's also something striking about him or his thought, which is not, it's relativistic, etc., but it's non-Eurocentric. So he opens up history, and actually not just history, mathematics, etc., to the genuine diversity of human culture and human civilization. By the way, civilization for Spengler, and especially in the German context in general, means something very specific. It's not the beginning of our civilized living and ethical living together once we stop being barbarians, as if we ever did. No, it's the end point. Once culture had a certain spirit, a certain inspiritedness has fulfilled itself in its highest culture, which he sees already as fulfilled by the 18th century at the latest. That's when a civilization state or mode kicks in. And he sees, for example, Nietzsche. So as we're reading through Spengler, and this fall, you'll see that he considers especially Goethe and Nietzsche, but he was also very critical of Nietzsche in the sense that when Nietzsche proclaims the demand for a Umwertung aller Werte, or Umschaffung aller Werte, actually, the Umschaffung, so the transvaluation of all values sounds a bit weird. A recreation, a regeneration of all values. By the way, also Richard Wagner speaks of the need of a regeneration, a regeneration. But it's specifically with regards to Nietzsche, Spengler points out that a demand for a transvaluation of values, to stick to the ordinary or common English translation of the term, is actually already spoken from the standpoint of civilization kicking in. That is exactly what a civilizational thinker would have to proclaim, insofar as now what is possible is merely and only a sort of technical rearrangement. By the way, one of the counterparts to Spengler would be Isaac Asimov, just to point this out here briefly. So we're bringing together this autumn, these two thinkers of the autumn, Nietzsche in September, and then starting on October 7th, we'll have Spengler, the Spengler course. Now, if you remember, there's a quote by Nietzsche reads, what I really like or want or wish from music is that it be cheerful and profound like an afternoon in October. But we have to because of some time constraints, we have to meet on an afternoon in September, but it's such a late September afternoon that perhaps it already feels like on October. So on the 24th of September, Professor Ken Cheems will teach a 2-hour seminar on Nietzsche. And beginning October 7th, which is a Saturday, always from 6 to 8 p.m. UK time, which is 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sebastian Ostrich will teach a course on Spengler. I will be in attendance definitely for the Nietzsche seminar, and most of, but not all of, the Spengler seminars. And so let me just show you maybe what this looks like. This is the enrollment page for our Spengler course. You can find all the dates of the seminars here. You scroll down a little bit. So we're meeting for the first time on October 7th. At the end of October, Sebastian is in Rome, so there will be no seminar here. We return November 4th after 3 weeks. So I have a bit of a reading week in between, and we finish strong December 16th. Final discussion presentation. So if you enroll in this course, you'll actually you can present your own talk at the end. Now I'll show you the enrollment page for Nietzsche. If you have questions on Nietzsche, by the way, or on Spengler, let me know. I'm reading them, I can see them, and then if I can respond to them, I'll get to them as well. So if you wanted to read Nietzsche's Madman passage and understand what Nietzsche means morally, especially in moral terms, what the death of God means, not so much ontologically, but what it means morally, for example, for the development of liberalism and neoliberalism, perhaps also other moral movements, shall we say, of the current day, or the current thing, then is absolutely fundamental to understand what he's saying here. So we have 16, so we've currently got 20 people enrolled. If you wanted to enroll, there's 16 left at the moment. And if you're a high school student or you're in training or anything, then there's 2 seats left at a discounted rate. Ken is professor of philosophy in London. He is also the editor of the Oxford Handbook to Nietzsche, so that's perhaps of interest to you. So here someone's pointing out that my German Kant video about the first chapter is really good. Well, thank you very much. There is also on this channel here, on the English channel, quite a few videos on Kant, and also specifically on the introduction of the first critique. Now, what is the connection? If you have any more questions on the seminars or on Nietzsche or on Spengler, just let me know now before I disappear. Not gently, but before I disappear into the good night. Again, what is the connection between Spengler and Asimov? Well, what do you think? I mean, there's no obvious connection, right? But if you consider how, so if both see that collapse is in some sense imminent and imminent. So if you consider them coming to the same conclusion about the state of quote unquote so-called Western civilization, then their responses are, or probably for Asimov, maybe just civilization in general, which probably he also just deems to be purely technical or technocratic, then the responses are quite different. Where Spengler leaves open the future and hopes for, let's say, a good death of so-called Occidental civilization, which would allow for something completely new to emerge. And Spengler does think that there can be really new developments. And also perhaps, a weird amalgamation between various civilizations, which in the best case does not collapse everything into a sterile, homogeneous oneness. You see with Asimov a completely different demand, which is, okay, the calculations show this is ending. So how can we, in whatever the time horizon is, how can we ensure that in 10,000 years, after having gone through all of this collapse, we can reboot again the system? It's a purely technocratic quantifying. It's precisely what ultimately kills the Faustian soul, is here in an even cruder sense brought out as the solution, quote unquote. Right? So, whenever you hear solutions to, I think you're already dealing in our age ultimately with technocracy. So the thank you, Vigilius, for your question. I think, if you so okay, that's a good question. This is something that so Spengler's view reminds me of the ewige Wiederkehr in Nietzsche, the eternal recurrence of the same. He's referring to here, not quite. I mean, yeah, if you want to use that term of cyclical time, or so let's put it like this. I don't think that it's purely cyclical in Spengler, but he does see parallels or simultaneity between certain events in history, and hence he can deduce, and this is also the strange and utterly weird moment in which we are as Faustian men, is that we look back upon from the historical balcony on the eons that have led to this, and not just our 1,000-year period going backwards, but going back thousands and thousands, and at this point, as you know, millions and millions and millions of years. But I think there's a crucial difference so it's important, the ewige Wiederkehr, the eternal recurrence of the same, but it is spoken from completely different standpoints when they address Spengler and Nietzsche, that is, what it is that they mean by recurrence or return. And so with Nietzsche, it's ultimately purely on the level of thought. But with Spengler, it is genuinely, I think, on the level of historical events that that don't repeat. Nothing is ever repeated. Time is out for Spengler is crucially irreversible. But so for Nietzsche, the eternal recurrence of the same is not an ethical thought experiment, blah blah blah. No, it's that thoughts, as he says in Zarathustra, thoughts that come on dove's feet guide the world. It's thought that recurs. And a recurring of thought is crucial to Nietzsche. With Spengler, there are parallels along events that let one deduce what might come next. But it's always very important that both of them, where they come together again, is that there's always an openness for the future. It's never closed off. So we can see, if you come in to these courses, it might actually be a good idea to take the Nietzsche seminar and think after what the death of God means, morally speaking, given that this is spoken towards the end of the 19th century and coming out of this in the early 20th century. Spengler's book was published, I think, in 1922, 100 years ago. How Spengler continues that project now already in an increasingly technicized world. So techniques, the question about technology, will be absolutely crucial, and also money. Spengler is one of the very few thinkers who considers money seriously. I studied economics. I studied what they call PPE, philosophy, politics, and economics, with a major focus on economics. Neither in micro nor in macroeconomics does money ever play any role. You will learn about money to a certain degree in finance and obviously in international monetary economics. But ultimately, the fundamental models that drive so much policy do not consider money. And it's important also that you do not conflate money with capital, with capital. That's the means of production, to put it simply. Anyway, so here is a question by OSH. Are there any specific prerequisite articles, books, or ideas you believe are essential for a deeper understanding of Spengler? Well, I mean, basically, I don't really know, whether you ask me for a specific article, but I think what the question gets towards is a question that always comes, which is, how do I prepare to read these big thinkers? Well, you don't. You just start reading them. So if you start reading some scholarly article about Spengler, then you're dealing very often not with genuine commentary, thinking with, but with someone else's opinion. So what I would suggest, though, is, if you've never, I don't know what you've read. I would suggest just, try and get a PDF of the book and just start reading. Start reading Spengler. And if he makes references to Goethe, as he does, to morphology and analogy, well, pick up some Goethe. Don't go on Wikipedia and don't try and find a PDF of someone else's thoughts on Goethe, but try and find a passage in Goethe where Goethe discusses morphology, which he does mostly in his writings on botany. Not too difficult. Goethe is an extremely clear and wonderful writer. And whenever he references Nietzsche, just have a look at some of the writings by Nietzsche. The Will to Power, for example, should be very important. But ultimately, the prerequisite is that you actually, you just start reading. That's the prerequisite. And you just start reading, trusting yourself as you read. And then while you read, you learn how to read. So I would, a deeper understanding of Spengler comes about when you read Spengler, not when you read someone else. But an even deeper understanding of Spengler comes about when you actually start discussing Spengler with others, as you would do at our course. And also, once you've done that, you sit down yourself and start typing up a short essay, or essays throughout perhaps the course even, and at the end you present your own thoughts on Spengler. That's how you gain a deeper understanding of Spengler, and you're not just and you're not just going through or digging through, scrabbling through someone else's opinions on the matter, right? So a deeper understanding is not deeper, right? So yeah, you know the expression a mile wide and an inch deep. Very often you meet people who have a mile wide, all kinds of historical references, blah 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 blah, have read everything, but once you dig down a little, you drill down a little bit, there's nothing there. So a deeper understanding of a thinker can only come about by reading that thinker, by discussing that thinker and that thinker's ideas, without, by the way, the constraints of getting a credit points and blah, 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 which there are no credit points at our school. There are no marks. You don't get a grade for it. You don't even get a stupid PDF certificate that you've done the course. You come purely to take the course and to read the text. That's how you gain a deeper understanding of a text. Well, thank you very much, OSH, whoever you may be. A hermeneutic circle, yes, in some sense, but we are living logos. We are living and breathing logos. We are the idea that understands itself. When a child thinks itself, that moment that maybe you remember that moment when you were a child, all of a sudden you think that, oh, I could think of myself. I could think myself. This is how you should approach anything in philosophy, not the the bargain counter or whatever of scholarly opinion, but genuinely trusting yourself that you can read something. And yes, it will be difficult, but what we make a point about, especially in the longer courses, is not to import too much of our own opinions or so, but we go along. I'm currently writing a long lecture course on Plato's Politeia for next year. Yeah, I've got the Greek text here, I've got the German translation here, and I'm writing, and I'm just go along the text and try to articulate what happens philosophically in the text. And Sebastian's lectures on Spengler are exactly the same. And by the way, just a second. I'm going to post this again now. But this is the link to enroll in the Spengler course. We start October 7th. We meet 10 times, etc. So I hope many of you can make it. We have only a few places left in the Nietzsche seminar, which is on the 21st of September. But we do have a few more. Michael, thank you so much for enrolling in the Nietzsche seminar. I look forward to seeing you again. Okay, here's a question from Flom. So your name, Florian, just turned my from into a Flom. Florian, I don't know if you read the A. I'm not sure I know who that is. Are there any connection? Oh, you mean Dirk Adorno? Okay. The dialectics of enlightenment. Good question. I think honestly that Sebastian would be better suited to answer that question. So one has to be careful in general, maybe this is a text that you're familiar with, and so you make an association with that text. The little that I know about the dialectics of enlightenment is that it concerns itself predominantly, obviously also with the history of ideas behind it leading up to it, but predominantly with this moment of the Enlightenment and a critical response to it and the forgetting of negativity, etc., that occurs with the Enlightenment, which is, by the way, a fundamental philosophical phenomenon from the very inception of philosophy anyways. Where Spengler's work is much broader and a lot less Eurocentric than Adorno, funnily enough, right? So I think that would be one of, if not, I don't want to do injustice to Adorno here, but I would think that this is the major difference, is that Spengler is a complete relativist and does not think so he does think that the Faustian civilization is in a sense a peculiar one, because it is the dominating civilization of the past 1,000 years, and it is the dominating civilization certainly at the time of his writing. But look at China, right? Look at Russia, and he does not consider Russia as part of the Faustian realm, by the way, or India at this point, and so he's already beyond sort of this Eurocentric vision and by the way, so in that regard, he's much broader and deeper than Heidegger, because Heidegger, for all his openness to what he considers Eastern thought, which to him is only Japanese, that he never considers the Indians, for example, Indian philosophy or Indian thought. Buddhist thought, yes, but nothing of what we refer to as Hindu, the Bhagavad Gita, etc., is not relevant to Heidegger, even though it was already introduced to Western thought by Arthur Schopenhauer 100 years before Heidegger's time. So even though Heidegger is one of those who's open to let's say the rest of the world, he's still stuck within also, by the way, the historical genealogical framework of antiquity, the Middle Ages, and modernity, which Spengler also interestingly completely reverses. And so Spengler is in a sense really an incredible thinker who goes well beyond so much else of what was written in the 20th century. And it's quite striking to me to see that he's denigrated as, all the usual slurs that you would expect, none of which really applies to him. He's not a supremacist of any sort. He doesn't think the Faustian Occidental civilization to be superior to any other. It's a peculiar one, and it's also peculiar in the sense that it's one that we know because we are of it. We are born of its spirit. We are the last heirs to it, but he's not promoting any sort of supremacy or so over other civilizations. And instead, he ends his magnum opus with a quote from Seneca: "Ducunt fata volentem, nolentem trahunt." The willing are led by destiny, but the unwilling are just dragged along by it. It's also so. So what we have to perhaps also consider is that indeed this is the destiny of so-called Western civilization is to burn out. The question is just how it burns out, whether it burns out in a way that nothing remains, or, to quote John Gray, and he's basically referring to Heidegger, that all that it gifts to the world is nihilism, or its gift to the world and future world history, of which it will no longer be a part, it will have been once and for all, it gifts to the world something rather more sacred and profound than that. But there's no technical solution for guaranteeing such an outcome. Yeah. So I would implore you all, let me just point this out again. 24th of September, we have Professor Ken Cheems, who has been a great constant support in my life for the past decade, and I would consider him a friend. And we have now, I think, only 15 seats left, and 2 if you're a student. So Ken will teach this as a 2-hour plus seminar. Let's see how long Ken will be with us. And but 2 hours, you can ask him questions. He'll lecture briefly. If you're interested in what he's like and what he has to say, there's a live stream with Ken here on my channel just a few weeks ago. So you can listen to that. And so he will be present. It's obviously all over Zoom. And that's on the 24th of September, which is a Sunday from 6 to 8 p.m. UK time. Then the major course is for this term, this autumn term, is Spengler's The Decline of the West, beginning October 7th, a Saturday. And we are going to meet 10 times in total. By the way, here's a beautiful quote from Spengler. What the myth of the Götterdämmerung, the twilight of the gods, signified of old, the irreligious form of it, the theory of entropy, signifies today. World's end as completion of an inwardly necessary evolution. So he's a firm believer in entropy. And not to say doom or anything, but we should almost be thankful, perhaps, when we read Spengler, that we get to witness and look back upon what this 1,000-year period is ultimately then turning out to be, and we can contribute to it, as I said before, not just end in complete and sheer nihilism, but gift something to the world that will spark whatever may come next as a great culture. And you should enroll, even and especially if you are completely in opposition to Spengler, if you think he's just utterly wrong. Especially then, perhaps you should enroll. We don't want to have a Spengler fan club, as Sebastian also pointed out. We want to discuss Spengler because he is not discussed almost anywhere else. It's impossible to get an academic, except for in Italy. The Italians are a bit different, but Usually you don't hear much about Spengler. And that is a shame. It's a pity, because we learn here from someone who's erudite to a level that to me is unimaginable, unfathomable, sorry. We can, if he is indeed a sort of a prophet of what is to come, then we better learn what he has to say. Even if ultimately he is completely wrong, he may still be getting at something that tells us something that's fundamentally true and genuine about our epoch. Perhaps, even just any sort of notions about collapse and decline in general, economic collapse, one crisis after another. As Baudrillard points out, this system perpetuates itself by ruling through crisis. Perhaps that has something to do with not facing up to the death of God, to speak with Nietzsche, and the inevitable decline, and what decline or death brings with it. So, okay, here's a question. Okay, so I implore you all to enroll and join us at the Spengler course, and also, which is taught by Sebastian Ostrich, but also to join us at the Nietzsche seminar. And just to mention this, we're not quite sure yet, but Sean McFadden, another one of our wonderfully talented teaching fellows, who taught a course on the philosophy of the machine, where so we did read a bit of Spengler already this year. Man and Technics, actually, Sean chose for us. Sean might teach a shorter seminar course on the Unabomber and Gödel's incompleteness theorem. So that might come, but that's in, we don't know yet. So, but for now we have Nietzsche and Spengler. So given Spengler's relativistic and respectful position towards other cultures, why is he so unpopular today? Well, I don't know. I have no idea. You would have to ask the people who refuse to read him. But very often, this can just be because he belonged to the wrong team, to the conservative revolutionaries. And perhaps also, though, because he points the finger to where it hurts, doesn't he? And he's in complete opposition to the ideology of progress. And that is the fundamental belief of all secular Christians today, i.e. liberals, who haven't comprehended the fact that the very foundation of their morality is dead, is gone. That the horizon which anchored the universe, the moral God, the Judeo-Christian moral God, has vanished. And hence, that morality goes into overdrive, doesn't it? Hyper-morality, as we can witness. So, that would be it for me. I implore you again, the Nietzsche seminar on, and by the way, Nietzsche, that's how you pronounce it, not Nietzsche, not Nietzsche, Nietzsche. And Spengler, the Spengler course. These are the links to enroll. And again, this is the best way to support my work here on this channel, and to help all our teachers to keep their lights on. We do need bread and wine too. And with every enrollment, you help Halkyon grow in a healthy way, and also to sustain itself, so that we can actually build the alternative to the official academia, where certain things are just not discussed. And also, to quote Ken Cheems, and Ken has allowed me to quote him by name, as Ken pointed out, he said to me in February that universities are, and will increasingly, and already are, optimizing for bureaucratic types. And not just in terms of administrative staff, but in terms of PhD students, and even undergraduate students, and ultimately, of course, young lecturers or professors. And that creative types, as he put it, creative types will increasingly move away from the university and find new places to learn and study and be creative. Learn only in order to create, as Schelling said. That's the leitmotif of our um, school. I'm just reading an interesting quote here that well, let me just say this because Ezra Pound was mentioned. Begin where you are, because someone else asked previously, how do you start with Spengler? What would you recommend reading beforehand, etc.? Begin where you are. Begin where you are means open the book and start reading. Spengler himself, Nietzsche himself. If anything you do today, if you don't have a copy of the Gay Science, Die Fröhliche Wissenschaft, get a PDF and read the Madman section in Nietzsche's Gay Science, which is section 125 in the third book. So, and by the way, there is no oblique connection to what you here claim that there is. So there is zero connection, to be precise. Yeah. Okay. So this is it. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks for your really great questions. Thanks to everyone who has enrolled or who will enroll. If you have any questions afterwards, please just leave a comment. I will try to respond. And I see you on the 24th of September in exactly 14 days. And I also see you on Saturday, the 7th of October for our for the beginning of our Spengler course. Well, okay, here's a question on Heidegger and Spengler. That's something okay, I'll try and that's a very good question. What is your assessment of Heidegger's evaluation of Spengler? It's not an evaluation, by the way. Stupid word. I hate the word. As a figure of enormous erudition but rare superficiality of thinking. So, well, Heidegger has these ways of ranting against people, doesn't he? Especially when he's a bit younger. And I sometimes wonder whether, also in the case of his, assessment of Hegel, whether there isn't something else coming through. Spengler approaches Geschichte, history, from a different standpoint than does Heidegger. And that doesn't mean, obviously, that Spengler is superficial. I would, rather than looking at such a remark, I would rather try and read. And I think this is in the Parmenides lecture course, or maybe this is in the Schwarze Hefte, what you just quoted. But I would rather try something else. Again, so we're back to basically opinion, and even great thinkers can fall into opinion. We all do. And we're all prone to ad hominem attacks, not to attack someone ad hominem, etc. What I would do, instead of trying to figure out what someone's opinion was, is instead, if you've read a bit of Heidegger on Geschichte and your name is John, so I would think that you're probably English. So there's already an issue because you don't have a word for Geschichte. It's not history. I'm sorry. It's not history. Geschichte cannot be translated. There's no word for Geschichte in English. It's not story. It's not narrative. There is no corresponding word in English that I have come across yet. Perhaps it's tidings, sendings, messages, waves. That would be ways of understanding Geschichte. But instead of, getting lost in the weeds of someone's remarks and opinions about someone else, blah, 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 instead, read Spengler, read Heidegger, draw out the sense of Geschichte that you get from both of them, and see then how and why, not how they differ and where they are the same. That's for scholars. Who cares about that nonsense? No, 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 no. How and why Geschichte, history, let's say, itself and time, why is it that it becomes so crucial and important with the 19th and the 20th and going forward with these centuries, where we look back upon millions and millions of years of history and prehistory, but also look forwards millions and millions of years? Why is that something that occurs? Why is that coming to the fore? And what is it that we can learn from these two thinkers? So forget about their opinions about each other. Forget about where they, in terms of their theories, differ. That's for scholars. They write papers about, this is where Sartre and Heidegger have something in common, and this is where Sartre and Heidegger actually have nothing in common. And this is how you can build a career in academia. That's not what we care about here. We care about thinking. So this, I think, would be one approach here, perhaps. Okay. Right. Okay, there's something else going on now that I have no idea what it is. So in the chat, I mean, and that's great. Have a chat. Have everything. I see you in September in 2 weeks, and I also see you in October in 3 weeks, when this I have to just absolutely post by good old Melanie. Melanie, you have to come to our courses again. We miss you. Fabulous response. Well, it would be fabulous to have you again. There will be a bit of Kant next year, Melanie. That much I can say. So, all right. Okay. I hope that your questions have been answered. Your worries are now bigger than before. You are more confused in a good way, perhaps, than before. Because in philosophy, nothing is ever clear. If someone presents Plato to you and claims that, this is what he means here, and this is blah, 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 well, you're not really dealing with philosophy. Nothing is clear in Plato at all. But Plato himself is in a constant mode of self-critique. This is why any and all of the so-called dialogues are in an apparently contradict each other. So I leave you with that, and I will not go gentle into that good night, nor should so-called Western civilization. So I see you. If you have questions, let me know in a comment. I will respond. And, well, I shall retire. Good night.